Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. This is Lunch with Lincoln. I am Jeff Timmer, a senior advisor with the Lincoln Project. Welcome to this episode of Lunch with Lincoln. Joining me today, I'm really excited about our guest. Wajahat Ali is a Daily Beast columnist, a former New York Times writer, a best-selling author, TED Talk speaker, award-winning playwright, Emmy and Peabody winning producer. I just welcome to the show. You've got such a great voice and your commentary on politics, the state of politics in the U.S. today. Thank you, and thank you for joining us today.
You forgot exhausted father of three who is currently wearing gym shorts.
There
I
you
think that
go.
is the most important characteristic. But thank you. And also, with that amazing introduction, if I wasn't married, I could have easily scored 2 dates. So my wife, who's probably listening, like, who's that Wajahat? I want to marry that guy. So your Venmo is in the. Just check your Venmo, Jeff. You've done
All
your
right,
job.
all right. Well, you've got a book came out earlier this year. Go back to where you came from. Tell us about the book, the origins, and the reception. Some of your observations.
Well, thank you all for watching right now. I can't see you, but I can hear you in the comment section. Go back to where you came from, and other helpful recommendations on how to become American is a love letter to a country that sometimes doesn't love you back. It's about loving a country that doesn't love you back. It's about being in a country that sometimes holds your loyalty and patriotism as suspect because of your ethnicity or skin color or your gender or your religion or your national origin. And it's about navigating, especially in the past 20 years since this war on terror, how to be both us and them. And I say that because I was born and raised in America, the Bay Area, California, if anyone's from the Bay Area, to Pakistani Muslim immigrant parents. And, things weren't perfect. You get called certain things like Gandhi and Apu, which aren't that bad. And then 9/11 happens. And 9/11 happens and kind of shatters for some of us that type of privilege and cocoon and a strong type of identity as an American. We realized, oh, it's conditional for some of us. It comes with a hyphen. It comes with an asterisk. It can be revoked at any time, just like that. Just like it happened to the Japanese Americans, just like it's happened to African Americans, just like it happened back in the day to Italians, in Eastern European Jews. And in the past 20 years, specifically with the 9/11 crisis, that for my generation was this fork in the timeline. There's always a pre 9/11 and a post 9/11. And how does it feel to be the other in your own country? How does it feel to be both us and them? How does it feel when you go to Muslim majority countries like I did? They say, why does the West hate Islam? And here you get asked, why does Islam hate the West? And the whole time I'm like, who is Islam and who is the West? And how come I've never met either of them? And so through my kind of personal lens, it tracks the journey, if you will, I think mostly of this country of the past 20 years, but also tell my parents' story of 1965 Immigration Nationality Act, how for them that was the Willy Wonka ticket, and they came here, and my father had this let me put it this way. There was this one story I gave in the book, not too much of a spoiler, it's in the beginning, which kind of does this beautiful microcosm of America, both the Statue of Liberty that welcomes and the nativists and the xenophobes who say get out. My father came here as a young student, brilliant nerd, researcher. He said back in those days, you can easily just go and like get an extension. And it was time to get an extension. He had applied to grad school. He got a scholarship, right? He got a fellowship. So he goes to the office and he immediately, his spidey sense goes, oh, this is bad. The immigration officer looks him up and down. And he goes, you Arabs only come here to fuck our American girls. Now, if you've been paying attention, my father's not an Arab. He's from Pakistan. And he's like, what? And then the guy just goes on this rant and orders him deported. My father's a poor student. He has 1 week to figure this ish out. And he says, all right, I'm screwed. I'm going to buy a one-way ticket to Karachi. He goes to every single lawyer he can in Chicago. On the last day, he goes to somewhere called Hoffman Estates, which is a suburb. And this last attorney says, you're SOL. I'm so sorry. But my father, at that time, he says there was a young man who had just passed the bar who got hired, but he wasn't an attorney yet. He was listening to the case. My father says, oh my God, great. I got to go back to Pakistan. This young man, a white man named John, my father remembers, runs out and says, actually, you might apply for this new special visa, which later became the Einstein visa, which, by the way, was the visa that Melania Trump got in. And Melania Trump's special skill was that she posed naked on a fur rug for GQ. And my father's special skill, outstanding contribution to the United States of America, was a brilliant researcher. But anyway, he says, I'll do this for you for free. Cancel the ticket. I think you could get this visa. Let's go to the immigration court and judge. My father goes. He says, fine. My father says based on the judge's name, he thought the judge was a Jewish man. And immediately the judge looked at it, looked at him, looked at it, and said, you just realized what was up. Put two and two together. And he said, listen, I'll give you a couple of days. Give me the paperwork. I think you can apply for this. And a few months later, my father then was allowed to stay and then fast-tracked his way to become a citizen. I mentioned that story because it's a beautiful microcosm of America's kindness and America's cruelty. There's always been this tug of war, right? Between us expanding and stretching ourselves to be the best versions of ourselves and those who want to restrict the narrative, to ban books, to don't say gay, right? To restrict this narrative to only a few protagonists. And so the book, Go Back to Where You Came From, is type of slap in the face, but also done with some humor and I hope some truth. And it's been really lovely. The people who've read it have given me fantastic feedback. So for those of you who are watching, Amazon's doing a 50% off sale right now. Go get it on Amazon. It's the only time I'll recommend you going and getting anything on Amazon, but it's 50% off. I'm a son of immigrants. It's too good of a deal.
What year did this happen? The story with your dad?
71.
71. So 50 years ago. I mean, so this, yeah. I mean, I don't think it's surprising to anyone that this kind of us versus them, the others, has been part of American culture and immigration, since we've had America. And so I don't think that the xenophobia, the rise, the normalization of the xenophobia in the Republican Party should come as much of a surprise to anybody. Much has been talked about the fabled 2012 autopsy report that the Republicans did. Smart people within the Republican Party looked at the demographic changes in the country, the future of the country, the fact that the Republican Party was, kind of had the life cycle of a star. They were becoming denser, older, hotter, and whiter, and they were destined to implode on the trajectory they were in. And they came up with this report that said we need to expand our reach to non-traditional, non-white voters. From that, they came Donald Trump. So that was the lesson that the Republican Party took. And so where we're at today, I don't think is a surprise to anybody who's lived those kinds of examples like you mentioned there.
Yeah, and you know what's so interesting, and for the listeners right now, let's take it back to 2000, the DeLorean. Back in the day, Grover Norquist, conservatives know that name, had this smart idea. He said, listen, Muslims can be a winnable constituency. Family values, a lot of them are traditional. They believe in God. Some of them are, all about like less taxes and small business. I think we can win them over. So what George W. Bush did is he courted Muslims aggressively, right? He reached out to them. And Muslims at that time, they're in a lot of battleground states, especially Florida and Michigan. Mm-hmm. Muslims were oftentimes desperately trying to get an invite to the prom, but Democrats kind of rejected us. So when you never get a date and someone comes up and flatters you, you're like, oh, okay. And I did not personally vote Republican, but I know many in Florida and California did, is because the Republicans did outreach. George Bush said, I'm listening to you. They wanted to remove something called secret evidence. After 9/11, George W. Bush went to a mosque, right? And so in a strange way, I think George W. Bush was elected because of the Muslim vote. When it came into Florida, 90% of the Muslim voters in Florida went for Bush. Bush won the state by 535 votes. And Grover Norquist crowed, we won because of the Muslim vote, right? And then the funny thing is George W. Bush, not a fan of him or his 8 years of presidency, but even George W. Bush, after 9/11, despite the atrocious war on terror and Patriot Act and everything that happened afterwards, he went to a mosque. He actually gave a talk. You remember this, Jeff, where he said Islam is not the enemy. And I joke that if George W. Bush was to run for president in 2024 as a Republican, the new Republican Party would reject him for being a Muslim lover, right? Dick Cheney would be seen as this old rhino. That just shows you how extreme the Republican Party and the whole Republican infrastructure has become. And also goes to show you that if they had actually implemented that strategy that you mentioned in 2012, after Romney's loss, we have to reach out to people of color, we got to reach out to the youth, we have to reach out to the women, they might actually win more. But they decided instead to go with the Flight 93 memo. I'm sure you know about that in 2016, where we have to charge the cockpit or die. It's an all or nothing existential threat. By any means necessary, we need to gain control and power. And I think it was David Frum who said, and he was very accurate about this, if you give the modern Republican Party a choice between abandoning democracy or abandoning conservatism, their idea of conservatism, they will abandon democracy. And he was absolutely right. And I think the rest of us, especially when you're a person of color, when it goes to your first question, and I talk to you about the story of the rest of us Americans who have to love a country that often doesn't love us back, I think we've had a more expansive and accurate view of America being the other, and we realized this is the inevitable result of Trumpism. That we know where this is going, and so many of us were seen as crazy, hysterical. Even last year, Jeff, when I said that Marjorie Taylor Greene is more representative of the modern Republican Party than Mitch McConnell. A lot of the experts who were paid a lot more money than me for being wrong for 20 years were like, "You're crazy," and I'm like, "You guys aren't paying attention. You just aren't paying attention to what's happening right in front of you." And now we've seen, the last thing I'll say is, when Joe Biden says ultra MAGA, it's like a transformer. I'm like, ultra MAGA, is the RNC, is the GOP. They're all synonyms.
Agree completely. I mean, and I've been out there, feeling like Chicken Little, as many non-Trump, never Trump Republicans have. I came up, I was a Republican operative, ran the Michigan Republican Party, spent my adult life helping elect Republicans. Donald Trump comes along, and it's like, what is wrong with everybody? The still to this day, the naivety among so many Republicans that what is happening right before our eyes and ears, the evidence that we have, is not really what is happening. I wanted to transition here to, the right now we're in the midst of a very unprecedented legal, I guess, the beginnings of or acknowledgement of a legal case against the former president with the exercising of the search warrant last year. And I think that lays bare the where the Republican Party is. You had mentioned, abandoning conservatism or abandoning democracy. That makes very clear that choice. They're abandoning the rule of law, despite Republican rhetoric, is very evident right now when you look at the reaction. It's not just about Donald Trump. None of this could have happened. We know what Donald Trump is. Almost everybody knows what Donald Trump is, but none of that could have happened without the enabling and the acquiescence of Republicans. And still to this day, it continues.
I mean, look at the RNC. I always give people this example that the RNC, ladies and gentlemen, this is not Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm about to quote. This is not the guy Beavis and Butthead Gates. This is not Jim Jordan. This is not Gomer. The RNC on its own, just a few months ago, said that the violent insurrectionists who tried to overthrow our free and fair election, who took over the U.S. Capitol, and in their siege, 5 people died, including a police officer. The RNC said that these individuals were ordinary citizens engaged in a legitimate political discourse. So that just shows you how far gone it is. It's not just Donald Trump. And I think that's a very important point, Jeff. And I tried to make it. It's not just Trump. See, people think in this ecosystem, the political ecosystem of DC and New York, as you know, people just want business to go back to normal. I scratch your back, you scratch my back. Let's enough of this headache. We know how this works. It's a revolving door, right? And I keep telling people that old way of doing business is gone. You guys have not recognized yet the beast that is in front of us, the monster that has escaped the lab, right? You cannot reason with them. You cannot rationalize with them. You can't make these deals with them. They're in it for power by any means necessary. They're going to burn it all down. And I think that's what people don't realize. If they can't be in power, they will self-immolate. If I can be in power, God damn it, Waj and Jeff cannot be in power too. I'm going to burn this house down. January 6th is an example, right? The defund the FBI. just a couple of days ago, abolish the FBI and law enforcement, right? Go after judges, anti-Semitism, replacement theory, QAnon. Everyone's a pedophile. Everyone who doesn't agree with this has the mark of the beast. Kill the media, intimidate teachers, intimidate healthcare officials, intimidate elected officials. I'm not making any of this up, ladies and gentlemen. This is literally what's happening if you open your eyes. So then you have to see, okay, are there parallels to this? And there are historical parallels. There's a reason why every sober scholar of fascism and authoritarianism who's kept quiet for their whole careers has decided to ring the alarm the last 4 years. And, they're saying, hey, guys, we've spent our life researching this. This is fascism. This is authoritarianism. And then you see it right in front of your eyes. I think January 6th in itself should be enough. But because of the right-wing ecosystem and the massive disinformation just this past week, like you said, with the search warrant, now Jim Jordan is saying, I have 14 FBI. It's like McCarthyism. I know 14 FBI officials who have said that this was done in a fraudulent way. Well, who are they? Right. And Donald Trump's, labyrinthine story, which is hilarious. I declassified the documents that I didn't know that I had, but I told the government I returned them, but I still have them. But even if I do have them, I'm the one who was able to declassify them. Either way, vote for me. Here's a fundraising email. Where do you think this is going to go? How do you think this will end, Jeff? How do you think this will end?
Sure, but and it just so happens the government planted.
Oh yes,
those documents that I happen to not have. I'm not sure where I'm at in the trajectory of my story here, but the people who will defy the evidence before their eyes, that's what continues to astound me. There are still those who say, I was listening to so much of the commentary and punditry since the search warrant was exercised, and there's still so many people say, well, we can't just assume that Donald Trump was doing something nefarious or knew he was doing this illegally, or how much more time, how many more instances do we need to know that whatever the most sinister conclusion is probably the right one? There's
absolutely
still willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, or that look at these Republicans, the Marjorie Taylor Greens or the Matt Gaetzes or the shooter that goes into Cincinnati, the armed Republicans who were outside the Phoenix FBI office this weekend,
or the guy who rammed his car in the Capitol and then caught himself on fire and then killed himself. That was yesterday.
But they look at this and can say that these are outliers, but they're not. This is the mainstream. This is the right within the wheelhouse of the Republican Party now. It's the people like Liz Cheney, it's Adam Kinzinger, who are the extremists in the party. They don't represent anything that the party represents anymore, but there's still this nostalgia in most of the way that the political world, the reporters, the players all look at this as if what we're seeing is not the norm. That somehow there's this norm, this historic kind of the way things used to be is really there if we would just, I don't know, somehow if some of these people lose an election, but they don't realize how far out of the bottle the genie is, and it's never going back.
That's the frustration that many of us have, because look, like you said, I was a commentator at CNN, wrote for New York Times, Daily Beast columnist. I've always had a foot into these mainstream circles, this revolving door. I call it an incestuous ecosystem of money, politics, and media. And when you're in the green room of, say, a CNN or MSNBC, it's really fascinating. I wish all of you were listening could be in the green room and just listen to these conversations, because a lot of these folks that I went up against and debated on the DL, they hate Trump. These are Republicans who know what's up, but it's kind of like, I'll scratch my back, your back, you scratch my back. We're going to go get like a cognac afterwards. I'm going to date you. I'm going to marry you. I'm going to cheat on you. It's very incestuous. And so they have this type of, it's like what George Carlin said. It's a big club and you ain't in it. And so in that club, they want things to go back to normal. They still have this halcyon memory of romantic days past where, this is business as usual. You scratch my back, I scratch your back. We'll all help each other. But they are unwilling to recognize, because they're so close to the elephant, they're blinded, that this is what the Republican Party has become, that you can't coddle it. You can't buy it off. You can't rationalize with it. You can't both sides fascism. And the rest of us who have been trying to ring the alarm, we're seen as like the extremist, radical, reactionary, divisive types. And I'm like, no, it was like we're trying to be like Paul Revere, because because many of us were black and brown and women, instead of Paul Revere being seen as a hero, like we'd get shot to death coming on the horse, like, hey, the fascists are coming. I'm trying to save you. And so it's for those who are frustrated and trying to understand, like, why does the political and media ecosystem not recognize this? This is why. It's an incestuous ecosystem that depends upon each other. It's a revolving door. They're so close to each other that sometimes, being a human being, as you know, there's social interactions and relations. So people say stuff like, I know how they really are. I go to church with them. I golf with them. I dated them. They're not really like this. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. Look at their behavior. Look at their actions. Many of these individuals, especially the Republicans you're talking about, and this is a question I have for you, Jeff. What's worse? To be a true believer who has been radicalized by Fox News and believes in the deep state, or a person who knows it's complete bullshit and knows it's dangerous, but decides to go all in with it because that's how their bread is buttered? What's worse?
The form, or the
latter?
Yeah,
and
the ones
that's
who are cynically manipulating the system for their own political power base, knowing that it's wrong, watching the corrosion that it's brought into our politics and culture. Those people are worse. I mean, as bad as the true believers are, they can almost be forgiven because they actually believe the nonsense, the bullshit.
They live on Earth 3. They believe in deep state and QAnon.
Right. But I mean, I look at several politicians, people I know very well, members of Congress who I watched them as we were heading toward redistricting, moistening their fingers, people I know, who I worked with for years, who I counted as friends for decades, who all of a sudden, as they saw their career arc coming to an end, decided, I'm going to be MAGA. And I know they don't believe it. That's all bullshit.
I know they don't believe it. They admit it to me. I go debate them on front of CNN, and they're like, yeah, I think this guy's bullshit. And I'm like, wait, what? And then I go debate them. And I'm like, this is gross. You don't have to do this with your life. But that's how the bread is buttered.
They all have, and they recognize it. They call it and privately they'll recognize that it's a cancer, that the cancer is spreading. But they take this position that somehow the cancer will run its course. And that thing, the patient will get better.
Yeah, you don't have to remove it; it'll just go away.
Yeah, it just it's metastasized to really to every cell and appendage of the Republican Party.
Yes,
and it's not going to get better. Those who still think that there's going to be a Republican pivot are so delusional that somehow we're going to shake loose of this, or we're going to just get better by will. The cancer is going to go away, and the what was the Mitt Romney, John McCain, George W. Bush wing of the Republican Party is going to reassert itself. Has never talked to these Republican voters, the delegates at these conventions. These people believe and have a reality that is something completely different than most Americans. I believe that. I believe, they can't be right if we're right. We can't be right if they're right.
I completely agree with you. And when I said this a year ago, I said Marjorie Taylor Greene is more representative of the base and future of the Republican Party than Mitch McConnell. I wrote about it a year and a half ago, and people are like, no, you don't see that once they lose the 2020 election, there'll be a reset and the adults in the room would take over. I'm like, the adults in the room are cowering in fear. The adults in the room were barricaded on January 6th, right? It's done. And lo and behold, who's one of the queen makers of the Republican Party? It's Marjorie Taylor Greene. That's where the base is. I believe, and this is what I've said, and people might not like this, I say the modern Republican Party, or the movement, is a radicalized, weaponized death cult right now. I say that very deliberately. Radicalized by right-wing disinformation. One of the greatest threats to democracy, one of the greatest threats to science. Look at the anti-vaccine disinformation during COVID, which is still, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, COVID's still here. It's still killing people. For the love of God, please protect yourself, right? So it's pro-death, no exceptions for abortion. Not even, back in the day, Jeff, you remember this, that even people were against abortion. They're like, at least exceptions for rape and incest. No exceptions anymore. Going after contraceptives. The right-wing party of the United States of America, just very quickly, just to show you how much of an outlier it is, just to show you how extreme it is, even compared to other right-wing movements around the world. And we have some straight-up white nationalists in Europe. But at least those right-wing movements in Europe believe in the following: climate change. They believe in climate change. The United States Republican movement is the only Republican Party or the conservative movement that does not believe in climate change, a genocidal killer of all human species, right? Gun control, some form of gun control, right? And then finally, women's rights. Around the world, you're seeing the expansion of abortion rights. It doesn't matter if you believe in abortion or don't, if you're against it. But even when it comes to, like I said, zero exceptions, even for rape and incest. So where do you think this train is going to go? And I believe, and some people might not like this, but I'm trying to connect the dots. It has to implode. This modern Republican movement has to get crushed, imploded. Accountability has to lose in elections. It has to come at a cost where the people who are part and parcel of it, who know better, say it's not worth it. I won't get money off it. I won't get elected off it. I'm going to be a pariah. This is terrible for me personally. And it has to come down. I don't think it could get reformed. I think you need another party that comes in its place with some responsible people who at the very least believe in accountability, rule of law, and democracy, right? I think it's okay to be biased in favor of democracy and biased against fascism if you're a media person. That's just me. I'm crazy. But this modern Republican Party, and it pains me to say this because I realize this birth will come through much violence and pain. I just don't see it. I don't see it. And anyone I want someone to prove it to me that this Republican Party that we're seeing, this Republican ecosystem, has the ability to moderate. If you can prove it to me, I'm there with you. But I'll give you Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, Rusty Bowers, Mitt Romney, and I'll even give you Dan Crenshaw, who is a right-wing Texan, and they're against Dan Crenshaw now because he went up against Marjorie Taylor Greene. Show me the moderates left. Show it to me.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, I think we are at a point where we either defeat the Republican Party as it exists today, or it will destroy American democracy.
Yes.
And it's not going to be just a simple who wins this 2022 election. I think the 2022 election and the 2024 election are going to be far worse than what we saw in 2020 in terms of the coordinated, the breadth of interference that they will throw into the wrenches they will throw into the gears of democracy.
It's already happening.
Yeah, the logistics of elections.
It's precinct strategy. Yep. The RNC backed the precinct strategy to do exactly that at a local level. The DAs, the attorneys, the elected officials working in tandem with right-wing activists to disrupt the elections in case they lose and to cite voter fraud, happening as we speak.
Right. I mean, one of the conversation I was having with my wife this weekend was are we at a point where it's going to be almost impossible to salvage the free and fair elections? The fact that we might have gone past the point where we're going to have a free and fair election again. All it takes is one state in one of these, Doug Mastriano or Kerry Lake or Tudor Dixon in Michigan, to become governor. And all it takes is one of those states to be that wrench in 2024, and we are at an even worse place than we were on the leading up to January 6th and January 20th of 2021 in 2025. We might not have a peaceful transfer of power again in the future, and it almost, this is what the danger that happens with authoritarianism, as I know that you're aware, is that the pro-American, pro-democracy majority in this country that I count myself and you among, are we going, if Donald Trump wins through hook or crook in 2024, how many people are going to say, okay, we'll just let him come back? That's where the prospect for violence, for chaos exists on both sides, is a reaction to one side's extremity.
I know we only have a minute left. I completely agree. I think the 2022 and 2024 elections, I know this is a common hat now that we say this all the time and it becomes cliched. This is for democracy. You have to make sure that, I don't even care if you like Democrats, but at least they're for democracy. You have to vote for them for the sake of democracy. And the final thing I'll say is everyone should pay attention to the Supreme Court case that's upcoming called Moore v. Harper. If the Supreme Court rules in favor of Republicans in Moore v. Harper, exactly what you said, Jeff, that the Republican state legislatures who control 30 of the 50 states, especially in the battleground states, if they don't like the election results, they literally can say, I'm going to reject your electors and put in my electors. And now you have a constitutional crisis, ladies and gentlemen. That could happen by 2024.
On that sunny note, Wajahat Ali,
other than that, it's a great day.
Thank you for coming. Yeah, no, you also have a podcast, right? Where can people find your podcast?
It's called Democracy-ish. I co-host it with Danielle Moody. It comes out every Thursday. This upcoming week, we have Julia Yaffe, and we had Rick Wilson and Mallory McMurrow. It comes out every Thursday, and I have a column at the Daily Beast, and you can find me on Twitter.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody tune in tonight for the game we're in with Maya May and Trygve Olsen. They'll be previewing the big primaries tomorrow in Wyoming and Alaska. And with that, I want to send everybody off for the week with this new ad from the Lincoln Project. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Jeff Timmer.
Who was it, Donald? Who gave you up to the feds? Who squealed? Who told them what you kept in a safe at Mar-a-Lago? No, not that stuff. Disgusting. The classified documents. 15 boxes of top-secret files. That's naughty, Donald. And illegal. You broke the law. No wonder the Department of Justice and the FBI came knocking. They're coming for you. But who leaked? Who sold you out? Was it Jared? Ungrateful. Ivanka? They're backing away from you. Don Jr.? Your own son. Eric? Do you even care? Melania? She wants to escape. Mark Meadows? Who did it? All your old Washington friends are talking to the 1-6 committee and the grand jury. They weren't your friends. Maybe it was someone closer. Who could it be? Someone you trusted. Betrayed. Now you're the first president to have his home raided by the FBI. This is your legacy. It's bad, Donald. Your father would be ashamed. And there's no one you can trust. No one. No one at all. There never